African countries also need to step up and do their part. Only around half of the 37 million doses shipped to the continent have been administered so far. We need to get the available vaccines into people's arms fast.
That is the Africa's Regional Director for the World Health Organization, Matshidiso Moeti, raising concern over Africa's ability to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, given that only 9 countries have administered less than a quarter of the doses they obtained, and only 15 countries have given less than half of their allocations. With a third wave and a deadly variant looming, African nations are struggling to protect their most vulnerable populations due to not only limited access to vaccines, but also fear, which has resulted into hesitancy or unwillingness by many to take the vaccine. We'll take a look at this and more on today's program. Hello, I'm Oriani Tangishaka. While Western nations such as the United States have vaccinated more than half of their population with at least the first dose, many African countries are faced with a decreasing or complete exhaustion of their initial supply from countries such as China, Russia, and India, where they are produced, as well as from the COVAX vaccine sharing system that is being run jointly by the World Health Organization and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. U.S. President Joe Biden says that Washington will send another 20 million doses outside of the United States by the end of June, on top of the 60 million AstraZeneca doses already promised to foreign allies. But it is not clear how many of these doses will go to Africa. World leaders are hopeful of increased supplies following the Biden administration's support for easing patent restrictions on COVID-19 vaccines with what is called a strip waiver at the World Trade Organization. VOA's White House correspondent Patsy Widakusweta explains more.
With cases surging around the world, the U.S. decision to support waiving patents for COVID-19 vaccines is welcomed by more than 100 countries at the World Trade Organization, who also backed the so-called TRIPS waiver. The proposal was submitted in October 2020 by India and South Africa.
It goes to show the influence we have as a country, working together with others, that our voice and messages have weight.
The Biden administration is essentially committing to apply its convening power at the WTO to begin text-based negotiations to hammer out a compromise with countries that oppose the waiver, including the European Union, Japan, and the United Kingdom.
Sending a message multilaterally that the United States is back and the United States cares, not just about its own domestic interests, but also internationally on the multilateral stage, and is ready to play a leadership role, that's a very important signal.
But what the U.S. is supporting is narrower than the original proposal, covering only patents, not other intellectual property protections, and only vaccines, not other COVID-19 related technologies, including diagnostics and therapeutics.
We don't know what is going to happen in the actual process of formulating this text, and the extent to which the Biden administration is going to be willing to generate a compromise based on the push and pull, both at the international level, other member states, and internally, right? Internally, you have large pharmaceutical companies that are very concerned about the waiver.
It's the first step in a long process. The WTO is consensus-based, and all members must agree to move forward. Some waiver opponents, including the EU, have signaled they are open to negotiations to address the pandemic.
And that's why we are ready to discuss how the U.S. proposal for waiver on intellectual property protection for COVID vaccines could help achieve that objective.
Once WTO members agree on a text, a process that could take months, countries will implement laws to remove the legal risks of producing generic versions of the vaccines. The hope is that it will speed up global vaccinations and reduce inequity in distribution. While some countries like the US have given most of their population at least one shot, some countries have not even delivered a single shot. But the pharmaceutical industry warns that waiving patents may backfire.
You can have a sort of dangerous free-for-all where scarce supplies that are desperately needed to keep that manufacturing going end up being diverted potentially to companies that don't know what they're doing, and that will do more harm than good.
They say it's better to vaccinate the world through licensing agreements, such as the one between AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute of India. Humanitarian organizations demand these agreements meet certain standards.
It has to be transparent, it has to be worldwide available, it has to be accountable.
While the WTO deliberates on these complex intellectual property negotiations, COVID-19 surges like the one happening in India are a reminder of the urgency of vaccinating on a global scale. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Thanks, Patsy. For more on the fight to boost vaccine supplies in Africa, my colleague Ndimiake Mwakalielia and I spoke to Dr. Pere Toso, Senior Manager for Advanced Manufacturing Technologies of U.S. Pharmacopoeia.
When everybody starts screaming about vaccines, one thing that we notice is that we quickly realize that Africa is in a bad situation. And currently, if you take all the vaccine pre-COVID that you use to vaccinate the kids against yellow fever and other diseases, only less than 1% is produced in Africa. So pre-COVID, I want to re-stress this, only less than 1% of all the vaccine consumed in Africa are made in Africa. All the rest are just exported from elsewhere.
And then specifically on COVID-19, what is the percentage of vaccines that are produced in Africa, and what are those vaccines, if you can name them?
None are currently produced in Africa. There has been some deals ongoing with some companies across the region, especially in South Africa, to produce some vaccines. But as we are speaking as today, none of those vaccines being developed are produced in Africa.
There are countries in Africa with high hesitancy in taking the COVID-19 vaccination compared to other diseases such as Ebola and malaria, and they have turned to alternative medicine to fight the disease. What does this mean, and what is your take on it? Are manufacturers giving up on those countries, or are they working to eliminate the hesitancy level?
I think the key is education, right? To be able to understand how effective this vaccine is. Use data to be able to prove that. There are some countries that we can look at today where you can see that as the vaccination increases, you can see a decrease in the cases. So if we have some of those data that we can use to show the health authorities on even the citizen of those countries that the vaccine is working, I think it may help to reduce the hesitancy. It's not just in Africa, you've seen that globally, even in the West. So health authorities and global health organizations need to continue to advocate for vaccination so that we can beat this pandemic.
Dr. Toso, you're offering a few recommendations for Africa to boost its capability to manufacture vaccines. Can you elaborate on those?
The question is, how can we prepare Africa and low and medium countries to be ready for the next pandemics, to be able to produce their own vaccines? Because of the current landscape, the current ecosystem of the vaccine manufacturing in Africa is to start by what we call last mile manufacturing. What we mean by last mile manufacturing is to focus on the fill, finish, and packaging of vaccines. Vaccine manufacturing is very complex. You need to start by the antigen production, formulate the antigen, and then conduct the fill, finish, and packaging. To be successful, it is our opinion that we have to take a look at them holistically. The first one is the technical readiness. There's a lack of technical readiness currently on the continent. And when you look at the white paper, you can see some of the steps that we outline in that. The second area is the regulatory strengthening. You don't want to manufacture vaccine in a weak regulatory environment. You want to be able to strengthen the regulatory and to take it another step further. Because of the fragmentation of the African market, we believe that it will be more profitable to harmonize the regulatory agencies or guidelines at least at a regional level, so that a manufacturer in a country can be able to sell without trying to comply to multiple guidances at the same time. And lastly, we have to work on policy and access to market. You see, in our exercise looking at this vaccine manufacturing in Africa, we have discovered that in the past there have been some manufacturers before in the 60s and 80s, but most of those manufacturers disappeared because they were not sustainable. If we take all those three areas together and we work on them simultaneously, I think we can be able to get into a situation where we can increase the production of vaccine in Africa, and not only that, make it sustainable and prepare Africa for the next pandemic.
Dr. Tosa, why do you think Africa is not ready, whether it be through infrastructure and through any other systems? Why isn't Africa ready?
You have the finances, that has been a hurdle, but most importantly, vaccine manufacturing is very complex. We don't know, we don't have all the know-how, we don't have all the skills locally to be able to manufacture vaccines. And when you don't have that, the implication is that you have to hire people, some expatriates to come in, and that is more expensive. So we have to encourage more training. We discussed that in our white paper as well. One of the key tools that we can use to address that, for instance, is partnership. We have to strengthen partnership with some companies in the West to foster more technology transfer towards Africa. When it comes to the political will, I think we are in an environment where you can sense that there is a movement. There is a will that is there. For instance, you have a recent summit organized by CDC Africa that convened some head of states. And I took part in that, and you can see that they sense the urgency. What we are saying here at USP is we believe that this crisis cannot be wasted, right? It is a moment that we have to take advantage of, garner all the necessary energy, the momentum necessary, work with the officials, the policymakers, the regulatory agencies, the manufacturers, the finances, so that we can take advantage of this crisis to be able to move the world forward so that this status quo can change in Africa.
Thanks, Dr. Pereira Toso, Senior Manager for Advanced Manufacturing Technologies at US Pharmacopoeia. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, why is there so much hesitancy against the different COVID-19 vaccines? That's coming up next. Don't go away. Welcome back, you with our voices. In Kenya, health authorities this week have announced that they will not be able to administer the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine until June due to a shortage of AstraZeneca orders due to the crisis in India where they are produced. Meanwhile, in Malawi, they are scheduled to burn more than 19,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine because of a slow uptake led to their expiration, with authorities struggling to administer remaining doses set to expire in June and training mobile health workers to visit and inoculate communities. South Africa is the hardest hit country by coronavirus on the continent, and while it was the first to receive and administer vaccines, the process has been very slow. The government attributes this to various factors, including the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. But since its initial launch on February 17th of this year, South Africa began a new phase of its vaccination scheme, recently rolling out vaccines to the crowd of 60 and over. WEWE's Anita Paul tells us more from Johannesburg.
The work begins in earnest its second phase of vaccinations. The vaccine rollout began Monday for those over 60 years old. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize says the nation expects to receive more than 1.3 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine by the end of the month.
We know that everyone has been very anxious to know what will happen tomorrow,
and how we will start to vaccinate our most vulnerable citizens, and then move on to vaccinating the general population.
Those over 40 years of age will be eligible for vaccines in July, and everyone over the age of 18 will be eligible in November. The government hopes to have 40 million people, the estimated number to achieve herd immunity, vaccinated by February 2022. South Africa's vaccination campaign has had some major setbacks as the nation reversed course on plans to use the AstraZeneca vaccine after studies indicated it might not be fully effective against the variant of the virus that is dominant in South Africa. Also, health workers say even their vaccination process has been far from smooth.
It's chaos. The traffic is a nightmare getting in here. I heard this morning that the staff also had difficulties getting in. As you can see, the traffic behind you, it's been like this since yesterday. Queues everywhere of everyone parking outside, inside, just trying to get in and trying to get on the Sisonke trial and trying to get their vaccinations.
Sharon Flint is nursing manager for 15 Johannesburg area elder care homes with about 4,500 residents. While she agrees that the nation's vaccine rollout took longer than she had hoped, she says she's glad it's ramping up now.
We're in regular contact with the Department of Health because they're going to be actually coming to the homes and the care centres for Methodist homes and all the other homes in South Africa. And we've trained our nurses in vaccinating, so we've got our sites ready.
She said that it has been a tough year for her residents here. Some have succumbed to COVID, while others have struggled with the isolation during lockdowns. Flint's 92-year-old mother is in a care facility, and they're planning for the day she is fully vaccinated and can go out.
I'm going to take her out for breakfast. She can have chocolate for breakfast if she wants to. She can do whatever she likes, just to put my arms around her and hug her. So I think it's going to be such a celebration. That scene is likely to be repeated, with or without the chocolate, across the Rainbow Nation in coming months, as South Africa's elderly get this essential protection. Anita Powell, WEWE News, Johannesburg.
Uptake of the AstraZeneca vaccine in Somalia has been low, despite receiving 300,000 doses since March. As Mohamed Kayihe reports, health authorities says fasting during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and misinformation about the vaccine has been to blame.
Banagdir Hospital in Mogadishu is one of the main vaccination centers in Somalia's capital. Since the start of the holy month of Ramadan, few people have turned up to receive the immunization, which is key in the fight against the global coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Ubah Farah is the Family Health Director at the Ministry of Health.
The main cause that resulted in the slow pace of COVID-19 vaccination is the fasting of the holy month of Ramadan. Also, medical issues related to reported blood clots in some European countries cause some concerns. Likewise, the unfounded myth that states the vaccination could lead to infertility.
warar kale oo aad ku turkuteen oo kamid tahay in talaalka uu yareynayo ilmo dhaleenka ama xubnaha taranka wax u dhimaayo infertility keenayo.
About 130,000 Somalis have so far been vaccinated, but the remaining doses will expire in few months if not utilized. Dr. Abdinasir Ibrahim Mualim is the director of the National COVID-19 Call Center in the capital Mogadishu. He says they have received 18,000 calls per day in the past 2 months.
We offer referral for callers with severe symptoms related to the virus. We also boosted our online awareness campaign for callers on the significance of taking the vaccine.
Officials are enlisting Muslim religious leaders in an effort to persuade more people to take the vaccine. One of the nation's prominent clerics, Sheikh Abdul Hayy Sheikh Adam, said the injection does not interfere with Ramadan.
Scholars have agreed that the COVID-19 vaccines or any other injection during the holy month of Ramadan performed through the veins or joints will not nullify the fast so long as the medicine does not go directly to the stomach.
erbadaha xididka laga qaato amuurka laga qaatee meel gudaha u sii duleesho ay hoos ugu dhaadhacayaan ma jirto mar haday saas ay tahay soonkii waxuma dhibayaan talaalka waa la qaadan karaa irbadihii kale ee noocyadaas oo kale ee daawada ahaana qofka asoo sooman uu isticmaali karaa.
Health officials are hoping that vaccination will increase with the end of Ramadan. Mohamed Kaye for VOA News in Mogadishu, Somalia.
Questions Questions are asked about the different types of vaccines: Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and others. VOA's correspondent Mariama Diallo explains.
In the United States, 3 vaccines are being used: Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, and a recent addition from Johnson & Johnson. U.S. health experts say all have been rigorously vetted. There are some differences in delivery and some debate about their efficacy rates.
It gets very confusing because the J&J, which comes in at 66%, people go, well, that's 66%, whereas Pfizer and Moderna are each 95%. Well, shouldn't I go with Moderna or Pfizer? Then the answer is, well, look, the J&J field trials were done in a different point in time when there were variants. So when you're looking at your top line goal is block severe disease and death, those 3 perform exceptionally well.
The British-Swedish AstraZeneca vaccine, developed with Oxford University researchers, has been used worldwide. But recently, some European countries temporarily suspended use of the vaccine over fears of a link to blood clots. After a review last week by the World Health Organization's Vaccine Safety Panel, the vaccine was once again given the go-ahead.
We urge countries to continue using this important vaccine. The AstraZeneca vaccine is especially important because it accounts for more than 90% of the vaccines being distributed through COVAX.
COVAX is a WHO-led initiative to help ensure equitable distribution of the vaccines, especially to low-income countries. In general, there are several types of vaccines. Some are developed from older technologies, such as so-called inactivated or live-weakened vaccines, while others, such as the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, rely on newer methods, such as the messenger RNA. Public health expert William J. Moss explains.
The messenger RNA and the adenovirus vector vaccines work a little differently. Instead of injecting the protein or the whole virus, basically we're injecting the genetic recipe so that our own cells make the spike protein, and then we develop an immune response to that.
There are a number of other vaccines that have been developed around the world, including Russia's Sputnik V and a number of others by China. While they do have an important role, it's crucial they go through the full data collection processes, says Moss.
One of the challenges, I'd say, with those, both the Sputnik and some of the Chinese vaccines, is that they were rolled out in some populations before we really had all the phase 3, trial.
But a number of countries are using the Russian and Chinese vaccines, with health officials in some nations taking the first jab themselves to reassure their populations. Recently, Sputnik V did provide additional data, as has one of the Chinese vaccine companies. So far, their track records have been positive. Given the challenges of a global pandemic, having a broad portfolio of vaccines is a good thing, say health experts.
One of the biggest obstacles that we faced is the manufacturing capacity. We need 14 to 15 billion doses of vaccines in order to get to herd immunity within this entire world. That's a staggering number.
Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Have you taken the COVID-19 vaccine, and what has been your experience? Please tell us on our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our WhatsApp number is right there on your screen. When we come back, we share with you our Women to Watch segment for this week.
We're bringing women's voices to the conversation, and more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment.
Here in Kinshasa, campaigns to raise awareness against the spread of coronavirus are common, but getting that information to people who have no access to water, electricity, or money can be a challenge.
We are here at Kalerwe Market, Uganda, Kampala, where in this whole market, women are crying out for their situations to change.
For women, it will be better for us.
I think a big thing for me is just being able to say that when these protests are happening, does it turn around into policy?
Our kids are raped every single day.
This movement got the governments
to listen. It really was powerful because it showed what is possible when men and women band together and say enough is enough.
It's not necessary anymore to climb on a car. I can be in any place to cheer with the people.
This week we bring you the latest news surrounding Dr. Kazimikia Corbett, a scientist who was instrumental in a groundbreaking research that led to the development of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. A leading coronavirus scientist, Dr. Corbett is the first Black woman to head a team that created a vaccine for this virus. She also educates and reaches out to communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. The 35-year-old African-American doctor worked along with Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institutes of Health for the last 6 years. This summer, she will join the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health as an assistant professor at the Department of Immunology and Infectious Diseases, where she will head the new coronavirus and other emerging infectious diseases lab. She will study and understand the interface between host's immune system and viruses that can cause respiratory disease.
I want to continue to do work similar to what I've done, except taking it up a notch. There are about 24 viral families that have the potential to cause this kind of pandemic. We can do things to help to transform the science around each of those viral families, because we've done that and we've sort of proven that in this moment with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what my lab will do is we'll study basic fundamental viral immunology and hopefully inform vaccine development in those fields, so that if there is ever another pandemic, that we can be one of the laboratories that helps us as a world get ready for it.
A rising star in science, Dr. Corbett is an inspiration for scientists to come. What do you think? Share your comments using the hashtag #VOAOurVoices. Until next week, I am Semenyesh Ekoye.
Thank you, Semenyesh. And that's it for us this week. We hope you enjoy the show. On behalf of Our Voices and my colleagues here at VOA, thank you for watching. Have a good day.